Welcome, everyone. While we can't see you, we are so happy that you are here tonight, either learning about Insight Partners and what venture capital is for the first time, or perhaps you've tuned into some of our other sessions, research Insight Partners online. But today we will hear from analysts and associates on our investment team, as well as our diligence and growth strategy team, to share more about what their jobs are like and their experiences at Insight Partners. But just to give everyone a very quick high-level overview and kick it off with some introductions. Insight Partners, we are a venture capital and private equity firm based in New York City. We focus on everything under the software umbrella, primarily in the scale-up growth phase, but really it runs a wide range, and everyone on the line today will share a little bit more about what that portfolio looks like and their experiences. I'm Katie. I am on the campus recruiting team here at Insight Partners, so I oversee all of our campus programs. Right now, we're hiring for our 2025 programs, which we'll share a little bit about at the end. Please, as Jade mentioned, use the Q&A feature to drop in questions throughout. Claudia, my colleague on the campus recruiting team, will do her best to answer some of those during the session, and then any that are for our panelists, we will get to at the end. So I'll pass it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. How about we start with the other Katie? We'll bump to the right on my screen.
Hi, everyone. I am Katie. I work on our diligence and growth strategy team, which you'll hear about more later, but basically means I work across both deals as well as our existing portcos and help them grow. I graduated a while ago, maybe 4 to 5 years ago, 2019, from Cornell. I was a statistics student and then kind of transitioned from consulting into venture capital and private equity about 1.5 years ago. And I'll pass it maybe to my colleague, Curran.
Hey, everyone. My name's Curran. I, like Katie, am also on the diligence and growth strategy team. I've been with the firm for over 3 years now, and in that time have worked with some of our portfolio companies, have worked on diligence across different industries, different sizes of businesses. And, of course, I've worked on a bunch of internal projects, portfolio level projects and things too. So can certainly talk about all of that. Before I was at Insight, I was a student at Georgetown. I graduated from their business school, and while I was at Georgetown, did some internships at investment banks, consulting firms, nonprofits, startups. So obviously happy to talk about kind of my experiences with those and kind of why I picked Insight and the VC PE space over those as well. Skylar?
Hey everyone, I'm Skylar. I'm on the investment team here at Insight, and I actually just joined this year, but did the summer internship last summer. So I'm happy to speak to my experience there. I am coming from NYU. I was at the business school. And also during undergrad, I kind of worked in the pre-seed and seed stage. So I'm also happy to talk about kind of my thoughts on growth investing and why I chose Insight. Will, if you want to take it.
Yeah, Zoom passing over of the baton. Hey everyone, I'm Will. Also on the investment team, joined earlier this year. I'm coming from Berkeley, so coming from the West Coast. Really, didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in college, but had an internship in venture in my junior summer and really found that I liked it. It was at a generalist firm, but decided to make the full-time jump over to Insight and have been loving it ever since. So excited to tell you guys more about what we do.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone, for kicking off those introductions. And thank you, too, to everyone on the line who submitted questions in advance. We have those questions up in front of us. We'll use those to kick off this panel discussion and transition to Q&A at the end of the call. So just starting broadly from the perspective of a student who may be tuning in and just learning about venture capital and Insight for the first time, what originally made you interested in Insight Partners when all of you were in the seat of a student researching companies many years ago, or just a year or two ago?
I can start. I think in terms of what made me interested in Insight, it was actually a colleague that still works here, named Julia, who kind of pinged me over summer and was just like, hey, we have this really cool breakfast. It's a recruiting event. This was long before COVID. And, while in-person recruiting and all of that was still the only way to actually meet companies. And you should definitely come to this breakfast. So I showed up, and I think the thing that I loved most was the people. I had no idea what VC was. I had no idea what PE was. So, I imagine that a lot of folks on the phone are kind of in a similar spot. And what I'd emphasize is the fact that that's totally fine. I think a lot of people come into the role kind of only having a cursory understanding. And, I think the important part is to understand kind of what we're doing every day, why we're doing it, and then, who the people that you're going to be working with are. Because that's what I got out of that breakfast, and that's what I got out of the interview process and so many of the other events that I went to thereafter. And that's why I'm here now.
Yeah, and I can also kind of jump in terms of what I knew about Insight prior to kind of going through the recruiting process. Very little, honestly, but I was familiar with the fact that it was a growth stage investment firm. And for me, that was pretty exciting because I'd worked previously kind of at the later end of private equity and then really early at the pre-seed. So was really interested in having the opportunity to kind of help companies grow. And although I'm not on DGS, it's cool that we can take that focus when we are investing and think a little bit more about that as opposed to just kind of team and market, which is what happens at the earlier end, and then at the far later end, very different strategy there. So what was interesting to me was being able to kind of look at initial traction that a company has and their go to market and how thinking about scaling that.
Awesome. Those are great different perspectives too, both from the DGS side and our investment side team members. And I know that a couple of I think, Will, you mentioned you had been exploring, a few different options or exploring different industries. What originally led you, or what was the turning point that led you to decide that venture capital was the route that you wanted to pursue after college?
It's a loaded question. There's definitely a lot of factors, but I think, when I first worked in the industry, it's really clear that it's a very colorful place to be, right? Like you meet a lot of really, really interesting people who are all trying to innovate. And it kind of, I know this is a cliche saying, but no day is really the same. And you're being exposed to a lot of different industries that, one, you didn't really know exist, and two, you didn't really know the scope of. So, I think what kind of drew me in is like, how often are we all thinking about like the aquaculture industry in Norway and how that's going to affect like our daily lives, right? And even though it may sound kind of dry, it actually gets really, really interesting, right? When you add in certain aspects to it. So I think just the variety of things that you deal with, and also kind of the nature of the personalities that are drawn to this industry, it like roped me in. I think it's on the investment side especially, like a very people driven place, and meeting a lot of interesting, cool people is the reason I'm here.
Totally. Yeah, that's a great point. And to highlight that the investment side role is a lot about sourcing those companies, speaking to interesting people with different backgrounds. We probably should have mentioned and explained what these two teams are that we had at the beginning of the call. But we have an investment analyst program that we recruit for. So that's the team that Will and Skylar are on, and that Will was speaking a little bit about in our diligence and growth strategy team that we recruit for on the full-time side. So since we've heard from Will, a little snapshot of what the what the investment role is like, and we'll dive more into that. But Katie, could you draw sort of the parallel on the DGS side and just give a brief overview on what your team covers?
Yeah, our team can start looking at a deal before we're even in contact with the founder, but we'll usually start looking at it once we've had kind of an initial touch point and we decide that we're interested in the market and in the company specifically. So then we might do pre-diligence work, understanding the market dynamics, understanding who the competitors are, things like that. Then once the deal kicks off, we're also involved then doing a variety of different work. But then the main difference is that once the deal closes, the company will get a touch point person or like a main point of contact from our group. and we'll help them kind of facilitate any type of operating work that they want done. So we help connect them to our experts in sales, our experts in technology, talent, anything that they might need. So we kind of cover a wide range of like pre-deal timeline all the way through supporting them until we exit our position.
Awesome. That's great. So hopefully you all have seen both from hearing from Will and Skylar and Katie and Curran. The investment side focuses on that early state or the first phase of the investment journey, sourcing the deals. DGS comes in and helps from there, connect the dots. Katie, you were talking about, connecting with different internal groups and team members at Insight. And I think that leads itself nicely into a question that we got about, what is the team structure like on both of the respective investment and DGS teams? And how much exposure and interaction do you get with senior team members? So I'll open that up to the group for a couple of folks to share.
I can start with that one. So in terms of the way that the teams are structured, it's similarly structured across both the DGS and the investment teams. So Insight has, I believe, 7 investment committee members, and each one has a team built under them, right? So I sit, on example, along with Katie under someone named Devin, actually 2 people named Devin and Ryan, and we sit on team Devin and Ryan. Skylar sits under Jeff Lieberman and sits on team Leaves. And if effectively what that means is you're kind of working most closely with their team and kind of the base of partners, vice presidents, principals, et cetera, that they've built out. And while you could still cover a pretty wide base of investment strategies, deal types, industries, size of deal under each partner, you're kind of working directly under the mandate that they're setting in terms of what they find most exciting, what trends they want to focus on the most, and kind of how they think about the wider investing world. So, for example, Devin was really interested in fintech. So I spent the majority of my time over the last 2 years thinking about Insight's fintech strategy and how we should be investing and kind of spending time in the fintech space. Jeff Lieberman, another example, spends a lot of his time thinking about consumer-facing businesses, and his team, and Skylar can talk about this a lot more, is really focused on kind of best-in-class consumer investing, what the trends look like in that market, and then benchmarking those businesses against one another. In terms of senior exposure, I mean, this is one where it's honestly probably better for Skylar and Will to chime in too, just coming at it from the newer perspective. But for me, I've always felt like we've had great exposure to our senior teams. At least on our team, Devin, Ryan, the 2 partners that I just mentioned that sit on our IC, and every partner on our team actually have, even things like office hours where, similar to what you'd see at a university or kind of in college, you can kind of just show up and say, hey, like, I have specific questions about a specific deal or a specific portfolio company, or, I'm just curious for what your trends and thoughts are on this space or this event that just happened or this, earnings report that just came out. Like, what do you think? And they're super open to that. I mean, I think they've always had an open door policy, but especially during COVID, kind of setting up those office hours and things was really helpful.
Yeah, and I can speak to kind of the experience being on the investment team. We also, at least on my team, have an analyst hour with the partner that we report to, Jeff Lieberman. And I think that happens roughly once a month, which is great. But then also get a lot of face time once a week. We have Pipe, which is where we kind of bring forward the most interesting company that we've spoken to recently. And that's with the whole team. So Jeff Lieberman, the 2 MDs on our team, kind of everyone, all hands on deck, which is great. And then there's also, the opportunity to have follow-on calls with principals and VPs, who are typically our managers.
Sorry, I'm gonna come back. One other thing I think that's really important to talk through, if you think about a lot of other investment firms, the way they do things like pitch on Pipe, which Skylar mentioned, the pipeline meeting, or pitch the investment committee, is the senior most person on the team that's looking at the deal will stand up, they'll say a bunch of words, the investment committee will pepper them with questions, and most of them the senior person will take, or maybe it'll be the senior person and a couple VPs. And then if there's specific questions about, hey, whoever did this specific analysis, can you talk through this specific data piece? Then the analysts, the associates will chime in. I think at Insight, it's literally the exact opposite, where the junior most people on the team are expected to give the pitch. It's seen as practice effectively. And so, I remember just as an analyst in the first couple months, like I was in IC pitching a deal and talking to the senior most members of the firm about like what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, what the team's perspective was. And I think it's just a really good kind of emblematic example of the way Insight values the junior perspectives.
Yeah, and hopping on that as well was really important for me when I was recruiting, is just, as Karan said, the ownership that kind of junior team members get over companies that they've sourced or they're able to do really thoughtful deal work on. So definitely important to add.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really great point to bring up, and something that is unique to Insight. I remember when I first joined and being on some of these IC calls that the team was mentioning with really hundreds of Insight team members, and seeing someone who was 2 years out of college presenting and being so impressed by the people on the team and how much autonomy they were given with their work. And so I'm thinking about then that day work leading up to the point of being able to present at one of these meetings, both someone from the investment side and the DGS side. Could you walk through what a typical day or a typical week might look like for you in terms of tasks you're working on, projects, etc.?
I can start with that. It's hard to answer because it changes so much, but I'll give maybe two different examples. This last week was a bit of a calmer week, and I was spending about 2 hours a day blocked on different things. I've been working on helping a portfolio company that we have think about like their trends in their data and prepare kind of a pitch almost for exit. So that's called exit prep. I've also been working on a very large new deal that we're looking at. So that involved a lot of agenda creation, slide creation to prepare for a meeting with the team. And then I also work on an internal project that helps us evaluate our portfolio overall. So those are like three very different things I was doing last week. Whereas today I spent the whole day in a conference room with one of our portfolio companies working on their product and tech strategy for two companies that are merging. So it can vary quite a bit, but you can probably tell it's quite a mix of deal work as well as the work with our portfolio companies for our side.
I can jump in on the investment team side. I think like firstly, I just want to note, like if the answer was like, hey, my typical day is always this, like that's kind of lame, right? Like we want it to be super different. I'd say like the essential job functions of what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis is like finding companies, right? So sourcing them and looking for them, reaching out to them, and then talking to them on the phone and kind of gleaning them for whatever information that we find would make them a good investment. All that being said, like that looks really different week to week. So a lot of the times it's like Zoom meetings, it's calls, it's looking through like our different sourcing mechanisms. But like in a few weeks, like I'm going to Finland to a conference in order to not only meet with a bunch of companies that I've talked to in the past, but also to meet with like seed investors, right? To meet with earlier stage investors in Europe so that I can find earlier opportunities in weird places like Helsinki, Finland. So, beyond that, let's say another thing that I've had to do is like sometimes you find deals that are interesting for M&A. And when you find a deal that's interesting for M&A, you have to write it up why it's interesting and for which of our portfolio companies it's going to be interesting for. Right. So like things can always just kind of pop up and you have side projects outside of those like three essential functions that I mentioned. But that's like the beauty of the job is you're never going to have a typical day, a typical week. And that's what keeps it exciting.
Totally. Yeah. It seems like that's the case for almost everyone that I've talked to on the investment and DGS side, and that there's a lot of creativity that goes into both roles. And just diving a little bit deeper into the sourcing and investment team role to start, we got some questions about, what types of skills, and I guess this question more directed at Will and Skylar, what types of skills do you think make someone a good investor at Insight?
Okay, I guess I'll take this. Obviously, I'm kind of early to being at Insight, but from what I've seen, I think just first off, if you want to be on the investment team, and as Will said, if you want to be talking to companies and founders every day, you have to be curious because you're going to get on the phone with a lot of different industries. So you just want to be a naturally curious person who's eager to learn more and kind of follow a thread into something that you might know little to nothing about. And that's great. There's a lot of whiplash that comes along with that, but I think it keeps the job really dynamic. So be curious, and then separately, definitely just really personable and friendly, and being able to engage with a founder and get them to like you and feel as though you're going to be their champion at Insight. That's a big way that we kind of like to pose it, is that us, Will and I on the investment team, we kind of want to ally with founders and help them, get investment from Insight. So kind of making that clear from the initial conversation is really important.
I think Skylar totally hit the nail on the head there. Another thing I think is important that was said to me like before I started the job, like 2 days before I started the job, someone on my team said, being a self-starter is expected, but it's not sufficient. Right. And what that means is like you have to actually be interested in the work itself. Like you're not reading, Axios Pro Rata or whatever the tech news is because you have to for your job. Right. You have to have a genuine interest in it. Otherwise, like it's going to be like pulling teeth for you or going to the dentist to talk to these tech companies or talk to software companies. Like I studied political economy in college, so I didn't know a lot about software and software architecture, but I'm really interested in learning more, and it's really cool to me, right? And if I didn't have like an innate curiosity about that, like Skylar was saying, it's gonna be rough to get through the job and to get through a lot of calls every week, right?
Totally. Yeah. I think the passion and interest for tech, spans everything that we do. And so that's instrumental for all of the roles. And so just to parallel that on the DGS side, Katie or Corinne, what do you think are the types of skills that make someone successful on the DGS team?
Maybe I'll start, Katie. You should jump in after or also. I think at a high level, a large part of the DGS role is analysis and kind of digging deep, right? So it similar to what Skylar was talking about on the investing side, I think a big part of the job is intellectual curiosity, right? You get a big data set from a company, or you start doing some customer calls, which is a thing that we do a lot. And, someone brings up on one of the calls that you're doing that, hey, this company, they talk a lot about the fact that they have this feature, but, I've never seen it. And you have to just have that little piece inside of you that says, well, let me understand more about that. Let me ask why. Let me ask why. Let me ask why. And let's keep asking why until you get to the root of the answer. And you have to do that on the market side. You have to do that on the data side. You have to do that after investing with the company. And, why did you miss your quarter? Well, okay, the fact that, the customer churned, that's not a good enough answer. Like, why did the customer churn? Okay, why is the product not kind of where we expect it to be? Like, you just keep getting to the root of these answers. And that's so much of what the job is. And so I'd say intellectual curiosity is probably one of the bigger pieces. And I think the other thing is just a really good, general attitude and demeanor. I think a lot of people at Insight take a lot of pride in the fact that we've built a really special place after 25 years. And, I think a big part of the reason why is because everyone that shows up is really happy and excited to be here every day. And they love what they do. They love the people that they're working with. And, I think, sometimes there are days that are more challenging than others. There are days that are much more rewarding than others. But I think at the end of the day, like, all of us really love and enjoy what we do. At least I'm speaking for everyone on the phone. I hope everyone loves and enjoys what they do as much as I do. And I think, the only way you really find that out, honestly, is by getting into the job and learning about what we do. So you guys are in the right place.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add is we always emphasize answer first, or like come with a solution, not a problem. So you have to kind of not be afraid to come up with your own answer or your own solution, and not be afraid that you're probably going to have to rework it when you meet with your MD or VP or whoever's working with you on something. You're probably going to have to iterate on it, but you don't just come with problems. You always are like you take the initiative to come up with a solution on your own, and then you'll work on it with them. So I guess that's just kind of like being scrappy, taking initiative, not being afraid to be creative or find a new way to do something.
Totally. Yeah, I think in that final sentence, Katie, you hit on like 3 out of 5 of Insight's core values. We talk a lot about scrappiness, creativity, hunger to win, taking initiative. So definitely all things I think that serve people well if they bring those to the table and they join the team. And Curran was mentioning, some days are more challenging than others, as is always true in any job. But what would you all say are some of the most challenging elements of your roles day to day? Or if there's a specific example or story, feel free to share that.
I can go. It's not an easy job, right? Like it's fun, but it's not easy. Like trying to find venture deals, especially in this macro environment, is not easy. And especially in software as well. So I think like the challenging part comes from having to be creative in how you're discovering companies and also how you're thinking about companies. Like I was saying earlier, that example of like aquaculture in Norway, like that is not right in front of your face as something that's necessarily interesting, but it's kind of where you have to go in order to find things that are not obvious. And most oftentimes, like the least obvious deals are the ones that do like the best for us. Like look at, there's a company in our portfolio called AMCS, which I encourage you all to go look at. It's like a waste management software, and it's done really, really well. So I think might be cliche, but thinking outside the box is probably the most challenging part. And then juggling how to spend your time on finding new companies or spending time on the ones that you're currently talking to. And I don't know if Skylar, you had a similar experience, but
Yeah, I think also what can be just kind of practically challenging, 2 things. First, when you get on the phone with a founder, they are so deeply entrenched in the industry they're focusing on, really aware of the portfolio companies that we've invested in that are somewhat adjacent and kind of trends that are happening, and they'll ask for your thesis or my thesis on the space. And transparently, sometimes I don't have one. So just kind of keeping well read on a lot of different industries on our existing portfolio, kind of asking managers or people above me what their thoughts are, what they've seen and what they like. And again, obviously, we're industry agnostic. We kind of look at anything that software touches, which is of course everything. And so doing all of those things, but then also being able to kind of turn it back on a founder and learn from them, because they're the best person that you can be learning a lot of this stuff from, and just aggregating that huge kind of knowledge base. So yeah. Oh, well, and the second thing I was going to say that can be difficult is there's a lot of autonomy in the job, which is wonderful, but just keeping really organized and maintaining a really good schedule for yourself is important. So that would be the other thing.
Nice, awesome. And Katie or Curran, anything to add from the DGS side?
I think hardest thing for me is putting in, I guess sometimes it's quite substantial amount of hours on a deal and then losing it, not due to anything that's our fault. It can be hard to bounce back and get excited to it hurts when you spend that much of your time. You just have to remember that you learn things along the way, but that's the tough part for me. I would say the other hard thing is balancing working on like 5 large things going on at once right now, and you have to really carve out time in your day, put calendar blocks, be very good at managing your own time to make sure you make progress on all of those and not let the other ones distract you, because then you can get kind of stuck for a while. So those are the things I've had trouble with, or I'm learning to do better.
And I'll round it out. I think, look, similar to kind of a lot of what Will, Skylar, and Katie were all describing. I think I'll start with the fact that the reason we talk about things that we don't love or things that are difficult is not to scare people, right? It's very much to show you at the end of the day, it is a job and there are 2 sides to it. It's not all sunshine and roses, but despite some of these things, we still love that. We still love it. What I'll talk a little bit about is kind of the downside of investing, which is, you know, every now and then you end up working with a company where things didn't go as according to plan. And I have that happening at a couple of the companies in my portfolio now. And, you know, it's never fun. But I remember particularly as like an associate or an analyst then going to associate, there was one company in particular where we came in with the thesis that, you know, there were these whole bunch of things that we thought were going to go right. And here are all the risks. And in our view, the risks were all really long term and really low probability of happening. Every single one of them happened like within a week of us investing, and it was terrible. But you know, we spent a lot of time there, and we worked with the management team through a really difficult time. And you know, it was painful at times, and it was kind of just challenging to see everything that you thought happened just be completely wrong, and like you were just totally wrong about everything. But you know, you get a lot of opportunity as such a young person who ultimately has no real experience running a business, you know, to actually put your heads together and build something really phenomenal out of that, right? And you have a lot of opportunity to kind of rise up and work with CEOs and CFOs and board members of these massive and kind of growing enterprises, and help them just really solve problems that are meaningful and impactful and challenging to what they're doing every day. And I think that's super special, albeit challenging.
Totally. Yeah. I think those are all great points, and nothing that we're trying to scare people away from the job, to Corinne's point. But recognizing that there are challenging moments, but that's where a lot of the growth comes from, and that a lot of what you're investing into is unknown, what that future will look like, which I think keeps people also really engaged though and excited about being a part of that, sourcing the next big deal or helping it evolve. But of course there are some missteps along the way, but we fail forward at Insight. And now just switching gears a bit, I know we've talked a lot about the different roles and what the teams are like. But overall, you know, we always get questions about the general company culture on a broader level. How would you all describe the company culture at Insight? I know we have a couple people who have only been on the team for a short while, but you've gotten a taste of the New York City office and the team so far.
I can speak to this briefly. It's great. I think like I obviously moved across the country to work here, and a lot of the people who work here are, you know, from the East Coast and had backgrounds in finance. And you know, I was a little concerned, like, okay, like, am I gonna fit in here? And it's been wonderful so far. Like the people are genuinely really amazing, and you know, beyond just saying, oh, they're so great, the thing that makes them great is that everyone is like curious to learn more about you, and you're curious to learn more about them, and people are already really like open to just like hanging out and getting to know you. Like people want to grab lunch with you, whether they're higher ups or peers. You know, like, you know, me and Skylar's analyst class, like we have a lunch set up for every Wednesday that we go get lunch in the park, and people are just awesome and nice, and we laugh about like when we have really good calls or bad calls. Like we talk about it with each other. Another thing I'll mention that's really great, and wanted to mention this earlier when we were talking about exposure to like senior people and partners. I think like anyone will get coffee with you at Insight if you ask. Like it might not happen tomorrow, but if you ask, like no one's going to be like, no, I'm like way too busy. Like I've gotten coffee with I think 2 or 3 partners now, and you just have to ask, and they're like really receptive to it. They're like, yeah, let's do it. Right? Like these people's time are extremely valuable, and still they're going to make time for like me who just joined. So I think the culture here is really fantastic.
Yeah, and Will, you weren't at our lunch today, so missed you. But I think the culture is really, really great as well. I think that is a byproduct of it, in my opinion, it being a really young, just like curious, fun, sociable group of people that are really smart. I think that's an incredibly unique environment to be in, particularly when you're thinking about going into finance as an industry. Not a lot of firms have so many young people, like all the way through. I think the principal on my team is, you know, only 5 to 7 years older than me. That's a really, it's just really unique. Don't know a lot of other friends who have that. And so again, your peers, your colleagues are also your friends, willing to help you, willing to take a moment to kind of share any learnings that they have. I remember I did a call with an associate on the biotech team. Should not have been on the call, just so happened that I had reached out to a biotech company. And he took the time to give me kind of a one pager on cancer therapies, what this company was doing, his initial thoughts on the space. And throughout the call was translating all of the really deep biotech lingo that I knew nothing about. So was taking the time to do that so that I could follow along and contribute and support. So I think that's really a unique environment.
I'll echo a lot of that, but I think I'll steal Katie's fall forward analogy in the sense that I think the biggest thing that I love about this place is the fact that everyone's pretty open to you making a mistake. I talked at the beginning about the fact that it's our junior folks that come in and pitch IC deals. That doesn't happen perfectly every time. In fact, it rarely ever happens perfectly. Most of the time you're going to make a mistake. Sometimes it's in IC, sometimes it's in your pipe meeting, sometimes it's, you're the analyst and you're walking the associate through the model or walking the VP through the model. It's expected that everyone makes mistakes because we intentionally go out and look for people that are really excited and interested about the job rather than people that have done this job and know it really well, right? I think that's something that we actually focus a lot on. And what that means is people make mistakes. And, I think the best part about it is everyone's willing to teach you. Skylar talked a little bit about that. But more importantly, when you make that mistake, it's a very forgiving environment where people are just like, okay, it's fine, just do it better next time. And the expectation is that, you do it better next time and you don't make the same mistake twice. But I've just really loved that about Insight. And I think it's something that a lot of people have afforded me. And, I hope that I'm affording all of our new analysts and things as time goes on.
Totally. I think that I like that we covered both the sort of more social side of the culture, also the mindset that people have, that currently you brought it back to how that then translates into what it's like to be working day to day and how people view work challenges and really working together. I think underlying that is a really collaborative undertone of we're all in this together. So if one person makes a mistake, that's okay. We'll learn from it and be better the next time. But definitely would echo everything that Will and Skylar said about the very social and friendly and not only curious about technology and the things that we're investing in, but curious about one another. That is something that I felt during my time at Insight, and that makes it a really, really wonderful place to work. And I think that those are a lot of, unique things about the company, and, help Insight remain successful is the culture and that people then want to stay and succeed here. But we did receive some questions about how do you think Insight remains successful through tumultuous and changing times? Is there anything else that, stands out to all of you as to what has led Insight to be so successful over its tenure?
My opinion on that is that we are, and I think I put this in the chat somewhere, but we are a growth software focused investor. However, we've invested in, let's say, Farmer's Dog, which is dog food. So that's not software. So we will go outside of our typical investments and we'll do things just because they're clearly a wonderful deal and we've done the diligence on them. So we're willing to adjust our strategy based on the macro environment or just what comes across our plate, and we learn from them and we then go and do pattern recognition and find similar deals that will behave similarly. So I would say just not sticking too strictly to our mandated strategy. I think every IC member is willing to look at different types of deals and adjust just based on the current economy.
And I guess kind of following up on that point particularly, that's kind of where the alpha comes in, right? Is in deals that, don't necessarily look on the surface really interesting, or because, if they do, they're already priced high. There's already a lot of competition to get into them. And so what I think is unique about Insight is the fact that they give space to junior people to kind of share their opinion and share their thoughts on these edge cases, as to why they could be relevant and interesting for us, even if they're not a pure software play.
Yeah, I mean, I'll piggyback on it too. I think like a big part of what kind of makes us so successful is just 25 years of software investing, right? It's over 750 companies, $775 billion deployed. Like, those are not just numbers on a page and numbers on the website. We've invested in more software than any other firm on the planet. And what that means is we've seen more software than any other firm on the planet. Like, and the pattern recognition that sits in our IC's head about, hey, this company looks like this thing that I saw 5 years ago, and that went really, really well. So I think if we can validate X, Y, and Z, this could go really, really well like that. Like, that kind of repeat interaction that happens time and time and time again is really, really important. And I think they do a really, really good job of disseminating that information down, and not just saying, show us the information, we'll make a black box decision and hand it back to you, but instead actually kind of teaching and making sure that everyone is picking that up. Beyond that, look, like, I don't think it's a big surprise to anyone that the economic climate today is not the same as it was 3 years ago. I think a big part of why Insight is really well positioned relative to other PVC firms today is because we've been around for multiple recessions and economic cycles at this point. And, I think our partners are very clear on kind of where to pull back, where to continue investing, where to double down, and all of those things that come along with, hey, the economic climate changes, what do we actually do? And that's actually not something that's as common as you might expect. And, I think that's just another reason why I'm very confident and happy being here. So
Totally. Yeah. All good answers. And I want to be cognizant of time and leaving plenty of time for Q&A. But just before we open it up and take some of the questions that were submitted during the session, I'd love to hear from each of you. What is one piece of advice that you would give a college student currently thinking about recruiting into VC, considering Insight partners? It can be short or long, whatever comes to mind.
I would say to first, I think if you want to be in this space, you have to be really enthusiastic about it, and like I was saying earlier, like, actually enjoy it. And the piece of advice I would give is, like, given that that's true, let that shine through, like, through your recruiting process. Like, everyone you talk to, like, you should be like happy to talk about this, because it's like talking about, I don't know, if you're a huge baseball fan, like talking about your favorite baseball team, right? Like, that's how you want to come across, like, happy, you're excited. It's very easy for you to explain why, because it's something that makes you happy and excited. Like, let that shine through.
I can also share, I think if you're a college student, definitely leverage your EDU email address and reach out to people. Will and I spent a lot of our time reaching out to people and asking them to chat. And I, in undergrad, had a podcast where I would interview startups and partners at firms. And I can tell you that the conversion rate there was much higher than what I see today. And so, if you're a college student, everybody wants to help you out and kind of offer any guidance that they can. And so if you are interested in VC, if you're interested in Insight, reach out to people who work here, reach out to people, at other firms, learn about different startups and what makes them interesting to you, and kind of any particular industries that you do find exciting. And as Will said, I think that then really comes through when you're in the recruiting process, is the fact that, this is what you want to do on your free time, is think critically about, startups, about companies, about, technologies and their merits. So yeah.
I think I'll give mine. I'll let Katie round it out. I think my biggest one is probably not necessarily an ad for Insight as much as just general advice. Go where you like the people. right? At the end of the day, the work is kind of going to be pretty similar, right? Your mandate might be a little bit different. The firm might be a little bit different. The size of thing you're doing, the paper you're pushing at the end of the day is kind of the same. But the people sitting next to you, the people that you're working with, the people that you chat with, the people that you have lunch with, that's really what matters a lot more. And so, just make sure that that's what you're focused on, and get to know everyone that's going to be on your team. So
Yeah, my last piece of advice that I usually give just for interviews based on all of my experience out of college so far is like, don't try to pretend you know things that you don't, because people don't want someone that knows everything. They want someone who can admit what they don't know and then go research it, figure it out, or ask questions. So that's always my general advice for interviews. We understand you're coming out of college, like you don't need to know everything yet.
Yes, all good life advice tips too to take with you, not only this year, but in the future as well. So I just pulled open the Q&A and was looking through some of these. So thank you all for submitting questions throughout, and huge thanks to Claudia for tackling a lot of them during the session as well. She's been a rock star. I see one question from Roberto asking about, on a day-to-day basis, how often do you consult with others about their opinions on your current progress or decisions? How collaborative is the environment? So feel free to come off mute, anyone, and jump in for that question.
Yeah, for me, it's literally every single day. Like it's super collaborative. My team at Insight is pretty close knit. And the way it works is like, I just pop over, the desk right over is his name is also Will Kenny. And like, anytime I'm like so on a company, or I don't know the perfect email to structure, or I don't know if I should keep talking to them, like anytime I will ask a question. Like literally every single day I'm asking, like, should I do this? Should I not do that? And everyone wants to help as well. So very collaborative is what I would say.
Awesome. And I see a question that I think might be a great one for Katie or Curran to jump in, who've been at the company for a couple of years. How has the investment landscape for tech startups changed in the recent past? How have you all seen Insight's strategy change in the past few years?
So I can talk a little bit about that. Every year we do this thing called our annual general meeting. Think of it like a company's like stockholder meeting where, Jeff, our founder, gets up and he talks to everyone that's ever invested in Insight about what we're doing differently and how we're doing things and how the funds are doing. When I first joined, the annual general meeting was 2 weeks after that, or 3 weeks after that, maybe. And Jeff talked a ton about how, the market for pre-IPO startups and late stage startups was getting too expensive, and we were going to stop spending as much time there, which has historically been Insight's core, and instead spend a lot more time going really early stage so that we can meet companies earlier and kind of be on their cap table already when they hit our core and be able to kind of win deals that way. 3 years later, we have gone completely 180 on that. And Skylar's laughing because I think she just saw our most recent annual general meeting, where all of what we talked about was the fact that, we did this thing where at the peak of the market, we invested in really early stage companies. It went really well. But now all of those early stage companies are more expensive than they should be, really difficult to actually get off the ground. And the market for early stage startups is actually really, really challenging to be in. And so now what are we doing? We are employing a new strategy. And we're trying something different where, we're taking the market that we're in and starting to build these little platforms where we buy one anchor asset and kind of build around it and do M&A, which Katie was talking about, to build platforms. And so, that's just a little bit on how the investment landscapes change, right? Trends like fintech, AI, and all of that stuff come and go. I think the more durable stuff is the skills you build on kind of the way that we invest in and the types of companies that we invest in.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think it's a great point that the trends do come and go, and that sort of the area of focus is where you can see Insights see some evolution there over time, but there will always be new companies and trends arising. We see a question here in the chat too. Said, could you share a little bit about the company's approach to professional development and career growth opportunities?
I can take that one quickly from the DGS side and then pass it to Will or Skylar. But at least for us, we're paired with kind of a VP, or at least I am, because I started more recently than Corinne, just to get kind of bi-weekly feedback and talk about anything concerning. So there's that kind of neutral party that I have to always go to. We also have people who are specifically focused on our career development and aggregating feedback from everyone, as well as taking into account any of our concerns. So you have like multiple people there that are dedicated to that for you. And then on a more informal basis, people will give you immediate feedback, at least on our team. You'll get an email that says, next time, like maybe do this, or you just go chat to someone at their desk. Because it's so regular and so frequent, it doesn't even feel like feedback to me anymore. It just feels like a constant, like making sure I know how to do something even better the next time. So I'd say for me, it doesn't even feel like they're formal feedback sessions anymore. It's just like built into how we work. And then we also have, of course, I think 2 times a year, we have like really formal feedback sessions where you get feedback from lots of different people you've worked with, and it's all aggregated to kind of a review for you. So that's a time to kind of sit down and think more about, what you want to change over the next year.
Yeah, and we similarly are matched with, when you join, a guide and a manager. So a guide is somebody who's more like a peer who you can ask, day-to-day questions, and your manager maybe someone that's kind of looking at your progress more critically. However, both parties are always open to answering any questions. I have a unique situation in which my guide is also my manager, but that's great because we have a really close-knit relationship as a result, and meet weekly. I think one thing I will say that I've tried to do in my career so far is verbalize to my manager how I receive feedback best, whether that's pretty consistent feedback loop, whatever it may be for you. And so me and my manager meet weekly, and every Friday, kind of what I ask is, what is one area of growth I could focus on more for next week? Just because that is how I work. And so I think it's definitely important to be open about that.
Awesome. Yeah. Great life advice too, to always be thinking about how you can improve and how you both like to give feedback. I think that is a great point, Skylar. And just one last question to end on. I thought this was a fun one for a couple of folks to jump in and answer is, what is your team or firm looking forward to most next year or in the near future?
Like our smaller teams, or like investment versus DGS?
Open to interpretation. It could even be you if you're really excited about the Finland trip. Well,
that is my answer.
For me, at least, I think we just invested in a really cool company that I'm super excited about. So I'm excited to see kind of how it trends over the next year and everything that we can build with them, because I think it's one where we invested with the thesis that we're going to be super, super involved and help them actually build next iterations of their product, their team and stuff. So I'm pretty jazzed about that.
My answer is similar, just because I joined over a year ago, and now I'm seeing some of my investments go through. So excited to see how they progress over the next year, and was just an onboarding for 2 of our new companies. So just working with them, seeing how they work together, that kind of thing, seeing the journey.
And I'll just do a social note. I'm excited for our team Christmas party in a few weeks.
Totally. Yes. Each team is doing small gatherings around the holiday, but as you can hear, it's social at Insight really throughout. And one of the parts that makes working at Insight a lot of fun. But with that, it looks like we're already almost at 6:30. I apologize that we couldn't get to all of the questions in the Q&A. I did notice some were about our recruiting process, roles, etc. So just to give a very quick high-level background on what that all looks like. Currently, we are recruiting for our 2025 campus program. So that means a 2025 summer internship. Current sophomores are eligible to apply for that. And then our 2025 full-time roles that are both on the investment team and the DGS team. So current juniors would be eligible to apply for those programs. If you are interested, check out the Way Up page. It has lots more information with the job description, details, etc. Unfortunately, we do not recruit from MBA programs. I saw a couple of questions about MBAs in there, but certainly always feel free to reach out to recruiting@insightpartners.com if you do have any questions, and we hope to see applications from some of you all soon, and hope that this was helpful. And huge thanks to our panelists, Claudia, the Way Up team, for making this possible. Glad everyone could join tonight.